we struggle, sometimes we suffer, we experience pain. And I thought this would just be a good time to address this because, coincidentally, or not, I had people reach out to me over, since the beginning of the year, just asking me, how do you handle tragedy? Now, most of the people that ask me this question, they're not New Thought followers, right? But still, we're all looking for that answer. We all want to feel better. We all want to move forward. We all want to move through what is making life hard, right? So we start shining our light again. Many years ago, I was telling Derek about this earlier, and I thought I should share this because I actually went through some very deep suffering. That because my aunt had dementia. Now, my aunt got this terrible dementia at about the same time my mom got sick. Now, my mom, she got sick from a surgery that caused some brain damage that she had to heal from. And so you see my mom now, she's vital, but back at the end of 2014, she was out of it. She was out of it. So my source of support, like my rock, my pillar in my life, wasn't there for me while I had to deal with my aunt. I had to handle all of this on my own. And I went into a deep despair. And at the time in my spiritual community, I remember hearing, if you just think more positively, that this will all be better. And I do believe that positive thinking is ultra important, but you know what? It didn't help me when I was in that deep state of suffering, right? Sometimes we just need a little more help than that. Or we need to have a different sort of awareness, which is what I eventually had to get to myself, okay? Because after I felt so shamed and like a failure, because here I was walking a spiritual path, and at the time I was doing a lot of speaking, and I felt like a fraud, because I'd stand up in front of people and talk about shining your light, and then I would go home and cry alone in my bathroom, okay? Because it was just that hard, just that hard, right? On the spiritual path, there is a lot of emphasis on positive thinking and how important it is. So this is actually really important to know. The reason positive thinking is so important is because if everything is source energy, and we are each an individual expression of source energy, this means that we have a high degree of responsibility in our own life, right? Now, if we were part of a traditional religious system, we could abdicate responsibility by going through hard times and saying, well, God must be punishing me, right? And so, well, I don't have to do anything because somebody out there, some divine being out there is punishing me, so I just have to get through it, right? Or, God is testing me for something bigger. And nobody really expects you to do anything about that if somebody out there is doing it to you, right? But see, in the New Thought philosophy, we can't fall back on that, right? Because we are responsible for creating our experience. Because we are creating our life experience individually as Source creates in the whole, cosmically. So we are responsible for this right here and right now. So that it is important to understand that positive thinking is important, because what positive thinking does for us is it helps to get us into a mindset where we're more likely to create a loving experience for ourselves. So if life is miserable, we're going to know there's a reason for it, right? And we're going to look for that reason. But we also know that on the New Thought path, right, Center for Spiritual Living, Science of Mind, we can't just abdicate our responsibility, right? We have to step forward. We have to take responsibility, because the source energy is everything. All there is, everything, even what's yet to be. There can be no opposing force. Nothing opposes source energy, because source energy is all things. So there's nothing in our life that opposes us. There's nothing in our life that's punishing us. There's nothing in our life that is testing us, except what except what's in our perception. Okay, so at times it will still feel like life is falling apart, right? We can't control everything. Even Ernest Holmes said in that new Design for Living, not every moment of our lives will be filled with complete happiness, with everything that the heart can desire. Right? Not everything. He goes on to say, life is often filled with undesirable situations and conditions. But he says situations and conditions. Right? Have you heard, there's a verse in the Bible, I didn't think to look it up, but it rains on the just and the unjust, and the sun shines on the good and the evil. Because these are about conditions. We do not have control over the weather, right? We do not have control over the sun shining, the sun rising in the morning. No matter the spiritual tools we put into practice, no matter the amount of positive thinking, right? No matter the treatments we do in practicing the creative process, as badly as we may like to experience a Canadian summertime in a few months, we will not get that Canadian summertime. We are going to get an Inland Empire summertime, which includes triple digits and a lot of humidity. But see, that's a condition. Positive thinking is not always going to change conditions. Sometimes it can, but it's not going to give me the Canadian summertime I dream of. However, positive thinking helps us learn to manage our responses to those conditions. And you know what? It can be done. I watch my mailman every summertime manage the heat. Walking around out there. He wears his long sleeves. He wears his hat that has flaps that come down it and a straw hat on top of that. He wears big old gloves. Because in the summertime, there are some creepy things growing in our mailboxes. I have had to fight them off my mail. Mm-hmm. He manages the conditions, right? So we can manage conditions. And we hit the helper. Positive thinking helps us do that. Now, somebody who was always a big inspiration to me when I was a kid was Helen Keller. And I don't even know if they still teach about her in grade school. But when I was a kid, I thought it was remarkable that she could become so famous, and she was blind and she was deaf. But do you know that she actually wasn't born that way? She got really sick when she was 18 months old. She got so sick she lost her hearing, she lost her sight. This is tragic. I mean, nobody wants things like this to happen to their children, right? And you know how her parents responded? They said, "Why did God do this?" That was their response. And yet when they said that, who would blame them for saying that? That was tragic. Okay, what happened to their daughter was tragic. Helen Keller eventually became an inspiration, a public speaker, a writer, a teacher. She's a very spiritual person. And she could look back and say that when she was young, before she met her teacher, Anne Sullivan, that she was in a prison because she couldn't see, she couldn't hear. Anne taught her how to interact with life again. She realized her prison was mostly self-inflicted. Now, she had a spiritual experience one day while she was meditating. She had an out-of-body experience and she traveled to Athens, right? Athens, Greece. She came back, and this is what she told her teacher, Annie. "It was clear to me that I was a spirit. Space was nothing to a spirit. In that new consciousness shone the presence of God, who is a spirit everywhere at once, the creator dwelling in all the universe simultaneously." Right? That was the realization that Helen came to. So Helen accepted her life, not as a disability, but as a directive. She was able to accept the package that her life was in. She said her mission in life was to teach the blind to see and the deaf to hear, and that she was not talking about physical disability. Okay? Now, we can become that empowered too. We can become as empowered as that woman who accepted her life, that she couldn't see, she couldn't hear, but she still went on to have a lot of influence over people, positive influence. We can have that too. But what we have to learn to do is accept the package that our life is in. right? Something has happened, and if we can't accept what it is that happened, we can't move forward. Now, accepting the hard things that have happened in our life, it doesn't mean that we have to be okay with it. It doesn't mean we have to think it's fair, but we do have to be able to accept it in order to move forward. I think if there was a magical surgeon back then who could have given Helen Keller back her sight and her hearing, she probably would have been happy to take it, right? So we don't have to be okay with what's going on, but we do have to accept that it has happened, because this is where our greatest suffering is. There's a tragedy, a trauma, something has happened, and we want it to unhappen. See, the difficult things that we deal with have already happened. They're behind us now. And our suffering is wanting it to unhappen, to go away. But that's our package. That's the package our life is in right now, right? Ernest Holmes, so he did say, not all of our lives will be filled with complete happiness. He went on to say, however, we should learn to take from each moment only the joy, only the lesson, only the good that is in it. Now, he didn't say, find joy, find the lesson, find the good in the tragedy. He said, find the joy, find the lesson, find the good in this moment. I don't know if you've ever had something really terrible happen and somebody said to you, oh, you'll find the good. There's some tragedies there's no good. But in the moment where we are right now, we can find something good. Like right now, all of us, in this moment, we could find something good. Right? We could. Even the Apostle Paul said in 1 Thessalonians, in all things, give thanks. He didn't say, for all things, give thanks. He said, in all things, give thanks. So we don't have to give thanks that something bad happened. Right? But we want to find something good right here and now, because when we find that tiny little ray of light in our life, it might be so tiny, like thank you for toilet paper, okay? Although that's really kind of big. But we find some little tiny thing to be thankful for, and it helps us to move forward. And that's what we want to do. We want to keep moving forward. A ray of light is not meant to not shine forward, right? The light from our sun shines straight out and just keeps going. It doesn't stop and turn around and go back to the sun. And if we imagine Source is the great central sun, and each soul is a ray of light, a ray of light and life, shooting off of the central sun, it doesn't stop and go and run back, right? Lights keep shining. All right, so we find some little tiny thing that'll help us shine, keep going forward. In the movie Steel Magnolias, I think this is one of my favorite movies. But Sally Field plays a mom whose daughter dies. And her daughter, before she dies, she has a little boy. And the little boy is maybe a year and a half old before she dies. But at the end of the movie, you see Sally Field watching her little grandson run around in the field. It's Easter. The whole community's out there. She's found some joy in that moment. Now, does she wish her daughter never died? Probably every minute of her life. But that doesn't mean that she can't also find joy in that moment, right? And that's what she did. So remember, Ernest Holmes says, find the joy, find the lesson, or find the good in this moment. Now, sometimes we need a little help doing that. Now, I know when I was going through my despairing period, I needed help. I really did. I couldn't just switch on a happy switch, right? I was miserable. And so one of the things that really helps us is to remember that divinity is everywhere present. Now, I say this over and over again, and I don't just say it to you guys. I say it to myself constantly, because I need constant reminder. Right? Sometimes we see things in our life that contradict that there could be goodness, right? So we remind ourselves over and over, divinity is everywhere present. It's present even in tragedies, right? It's present everywhere. But see, when we remember divinity is present everywhere, we open to receive solutions, because solutions come from divinity, right? Which means we could get a solution from anywhere. Now, if we're only focusing on the problem or the things that are wrong, This limits our ability to receive solutions on how to move forward again, because our brain has this thing where it wants to prove us right all the time, wants to prove us right. So if we focus on, well, why is this bad thing happening? The brain, it's not going to try to answer that question. It's going to try to show us, bad thing happened, there's a bad thing happening, there's a bad thing happening, right? If we ask the question, why me? Why did this have to happen? Why did this have to happen to me? We won't get any life-changing answers from asking that question, but we'll get more proof of problems. We'll get more proof of difficulties. I know you've all tried that. We've all tried that. Why me? Right? There's no enlightenment there. So when we see divinity is everywhere present, we receive information that helps us move forward. So I have had people ask me about bad things happening, right? And most recently it was my hairdresser. She's like, so what religion are you? I'm like, well, it's not really a religion, it's a philosophy. Oh, okay. And I kind of told her about how like we see God as us, that we are a physical emanation of source energy. She says, well, what about the devil? What about Satan? I said, well, I don't believe in the devil. And she says, well, what about all the bad things? What about all the bad things? Everything is an emanation of source, which means even those who have done terrible things, they are also an emanation of source energy. They are an individualized expression of source walking around on this planet. However, they've made the choice to waste that beautiful energy that works through them. They desecrate that beautiful energy that works through them. Right? They're making choices that fail to honor who they are as a divine being, but it doesn't mean they're not an extension of source energy. They're just choosing to use their powers for harm. It's like the metaphor of electricity, right? I love Bob Proctor talking about electricity in The Secret. He says, you can cook a man a meal, or you can cook a man. All right, so that's what happens if somebody is wasting that energy. It's the same energy, it's the same source, because everything is source energy. So we want to find the good, find the lesson, find the joy. When we do that in the moments, it tells our brain, right, oh, I've got a new program to run. I'm going to prove good. I'm going to prove lessons. I'm going to prove joy. And that starts with seeing divinity in all things. Now, this makes all the difference between us having the belief that life either happens to me, so I'm a victim and I can't control things out here, or life happens through me and I'm a creator of my own experience. So when life happens to me, something bad might happen. And it really might be this other person's fault, like somebody who ran a red light and ran into your car. It's their fault. They hit your car. You're obeying the rules of the road. They ran a red light. However, if we keep blaming them, right, as we're going through maybe medical things or painkillers, if we keep blaming them, what happens is we get stuck in that blaming, right? And then we can't move forward. When we're in victim mode, we think, I can't be happy until things go back to the way they were. I can't be happy until this changes and this changes. Then I can be happy. We ask questions like, why me? Why did this happen? So I'll give an example of this. Back in the early 90s, when I first got into holistic healing, I got all into self-examination. And I asked myself these kinds of questions. Why don't I feel worthy to get up and speak to people? Because my father abandoned me before I was born. Why do I have trouble forming deep, lasting relationships? Well, because my father abandoned me before I was born. Now, this is a valid reason. It really is. But see, I turned it into an excuse. Why don't I want to step out of my comfort zone? Because my father abandoned me before I was born. Now, I will tell you that the more I used this, the more I got out of doing, right? The adventures, the excitement, the getting out of the comfort zone. I did eventually move out of victim consciousness, right? I stopped making it my permanent home. I visit on occasion, but it's not my permanent home anymore. But I did not get out of victim consciousness by examining all the bad things that happened to me. I got out of victim consciousness by finally changing the question I was asking myself all the time. What do I do about it now? So now what do I do? If I am this extension of source energy, that means I should be able to make some kind of change. Prove it. Right? Prove it. And my brain did. It helped me. Okay, so we don't want to get stuck in the victim loop. So we want to move into life happens through me. Now this is where we stand firm. We put our hands on our hips and we say, okay, this is what is right now. This is what I have to work with. So what am I going to do about it? I loved in your meditation, you asked those what would it take questions. And I think those are powerful questions. What would it take to get this, to do this, to be this? What would it take? Because those questions empower us. That starts opening us up for a solution, right? It opens us for a solution because we remember the divinity is everywhere present. There's that within us which knows what to do, how to do it, and it compels us to act on what it knows. It's just waiting for us to ask the right questions. So when we ask that, what would it take? We open the way for solutions. We open the way for information to come to us. Right? Now this is empowered, this is really empowered creation. When we accept the package that our life is in, right here and right now, we can open to receive those instructions, right? Our directive. When we accept the package that our life is in right now, we can interpret those instructions and we can act on those instructions. We know what to do then, and we're doing something right now because what we do right now is really important. Right? The choices that we make right now open the way for a new set of options to come to us. So what we're choosing right now is really important. So we don't create a powerful change in our life or in our family, our community, for the good of humanity, if we are stuck in our pain and our suffering. Now, sometimes what has happened is pretty bad, and nobody would blame us for being stuck there. The thing is that we'll stay stuck, and we won't get to move forward. We won't get to do these great things. We won't get to be a force for good. We won't get to keep shining forward, right, if we're stuck. Find the joy, find the lesson, find the good in every moment. Find it. There's a book by John Welshons called When Prayers Aren't Answered, and he says this: God protects us not by prohibiting anything bad from happening in our lives, but by giving each and every one of us as standard equipment when we are born, everything we need to handle anything that happens to us. Anything that happens. Anything that happens. No matter how horrible, we have that within which knows what to do, how to do it, and it compels us to act on what it knows. We can get through. We can move forward. We can receive the grace. We can find joy again. Life is about joy and love. Because joy and love feel so good to us because they're in alignment with who we are as a divine being in our body. Right? That's why those feelings feel so good. Jesus even said that he came here not just so we could have life, but so we could have it more abundantly. Right? Have that life more abundantly. That doesn't change the fact that we'll have pain and heartache. Because nobody ever gave us any promises that everything would be perfect. We grow a lot, actually, through joy and heartache. Right? We do. Seeing divinity everywhere present is what gets us feeling that again, right? Gets us moving forward. Find the joy, find the lesson, find the good. Accept our life as it is right here and now, because it is how it is. If there's something we can't do about it, we have to first accept what it is so we can receive the direction to do something about it. Right? It's okay to not be okay with bad things that have happened, but we do have to accept it. Rumi said the wound is the place where the light enters in. When something bad happens in our life, it doesn't always mean it was our fault. It doesn't always mean we just weren't thinking correctly. Right? Sometimes there are things that happen. There are conditions and situations that can be painful, but what if we decide that the tragedy in our life is the wound, right, that Rumi was talking about, and we are the light that we call forth to put into that? Because we are that light. And that's the one thing that never changes. That we are always the light. The light is always working through us, for us, as us. That never changes. Never changes. Find the joy, find the lesson,